Welcome to the Be the Boss Now podcast. I'm your host, Gregory Allen Datu-Sindana, president and co-founder of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting, chief creative officer of Greg Dances, and #1 international best-selling author of Be the Boss Now book, 15 Key Steps to Start, Run, and Grow Your Own Business. So often, people don't take risks because they are afraid of failure or rejection. As an openly gay Filipino American who was raised in a working class, immigrant, and Catholic household, these experiences shaped my values and the entrepreneur and leader I have become, and led me to found and run different companies and nonprofits. I've also built a business that grew during the pandemic while creating opportunities and increasing access for people from diverse backgrounds. The Be the Boss Now podcast will lift up the stories of different folks who identify as Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Middle Eastern, women, queer, people with disabilities, and those living at the intersections of multiple of these identities. I believe there is a boss in all of us, especially for those of us who have historically lacked representation and leadership. Furthermore, when we embrace fear and failure as inspiration to guide us on our journeys, it will be for the better and in service to making our biggest, boldest, most audacious dreams a reality. Alice Wong, she, her, is a disabled activist, writer, media maker, and consultant. She is the founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project, an online community dedicated to creating, sharing, and amplifying disability media and culture, created in 2014. Alice is the editor of Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century, an anthology of essays by disabled people, and Disability Visibility, 17 first-person stories for today, an adapted version for adults. Her debut memoir, Year of the Tiger, An Activist's Life, will be available on September 6, 2022 from Vintage Books. You can find her on Twitter at sfdirewolf, SFDIREWOLF. Well, thank you again, Alice, for joining us on the Be the Boss Now podcast. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and I just always appreciate being in community with you.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Thanks so much for having me. I just like your boss, ready to get started.
So one thing about Be the Boss Now is that we hope that it gives people the agency to decide what a boss means for them, to live their wildest dreams and make change in their communities. Can you share with folks what it means to you to be a boss?
I think I'll first start with what I don't think it means. I don't think it means, controlling people. Employ people necessarily. Some people think about a boss as this exploitative, capitalist, buddy bags. And in some ways, there are those people. But there's always also the girl boss concept that also turns me off. This whole white feminist idea of what it means to be a boss, which I think is really annoying. And I think for me, being a boss is just about freedom. Freedom, I think, is the first thing I think about when it comes to being my own boss. That is something that I've always, wanted and always sort of operated as outside of my employment with other earlier years. But really, it's about just freedom to do what you want and how you want to do it. And also just the freedom to choose. The freedom to just be yourself. I think that's what it means to be the ultimate boss, to really define your narrative and to really have agency.
That really resonates with me. That piece around agency, defining your narrative, and one of the things that I was reflecting on for myself, especially as someone who was a union organizer involved in the labor movement. I think boss has a lot of different connotations. And to your point, for me, I learned about bosses being these CEOs who really make way more money than they probably should. And part of this process for me was about redefining boss in very similar ways that you were kind of laying out. And I see it as an opportunity or as a way to also think about economic justice, right? And social justice. Because when we are able to make those decisions for ourselves, but also be able to provide for ourselves and for our loved ones, that gets us closer to freedom and to being able to have that sense of self and agency and community. And so I definitely resonate with that.
Well, I also want to bring up, when you first invited me, I think it was, it's like, wow, this is really cool. But I was like, I remember emailing you back saying, Drake, by the way, I'm not really a boss, just, sometimes we have these very narrow assumptions. And I said, I own my own company, but I do not. Because they have employees, and I wasn't sure whether this podcast was all about being an employer. I was just there, I was like, by the way, I might not be the right fit, but I do think that it's these sort of images, right? The evil overlord.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a lot more than that. And hopefully it is tied with liberation and freedom, and the sense that everybody should, in an ideal society, have the means to be their own boss, and people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an issue of power, but it's also an issue of justice.
Absolutely. I appreciate you always so thoughtful. And, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you to be a guest on the podcast, because I just appreciate the way you are so intentional and how you hold yourself and are mindful about being in spaces. And I think one thing I talk about in the book is that the goals are different. Not everyone is necessarily trying to be an employer. There was actually someone who came to me and was like, what if I just, I don't have an intention to hire other people or even subcontractors. I just want to have enough to be able to support myself and my family. And I said, that's totally okay. And so I want to be able to make sure that folks understand and know that the goals that we have, even in being our own boss, look different. And whatever the goals may be, if they are your goals and you're clear on what that will mean for you and your loved ones and the ones you care about, then that for me is enough.
I think we need to take away the centering of corporations and executives. We're talking about being a boss. Right, a parent to be a boss. Somebody who just is subsisting and just living day to day. They are a boss, right? I think almost in many ways, both you and us activists, I think we come up against so many of these really outdated ideas of who gets made activists. So these are the same kinds of interrogations that we need to have about bosses, right? Just to make it expand it and also to give it more nuance.
Yeah, I totally agree. So often people don't take risks because they're afraid of failure or rejection. However, in my journey and as I'm learning more about you, I've found that experiencing setbacks and failures have actually taught me my greatest lessons. And in some cases, it even strengthened my own sense of self. Can you tell us about a time when failure or rejection was your friend?
Yeah, I would say that failure really was, these major turning points for you figure out, oh, maybe I can do something. And I'm not a total loser, Yeah, maybe 13, I have a dream, but also have those dreams change. I think that's really hard too, because sometimes we build up these goals in our mind and these ideas of success. And I think for the listeners, I've been to 48 this year, and I feel like, I've really just blossomed it now, and I love it. But I do think that when I was younger, I really was hung up on so many of these extraneous ideas of what's success should look like. So for me, I think one of the biggest failures that was really just difficult for me to purchase that with was in grad school because, I came out to San Francisco for Indianapolis, just excited for new life and just so, just about wide-eyed and just so excited to be in the Bay Area. And my goal at that time, it's been that way for ever since I was a student, was really to be an academic. I thought I was going to be a PhD. My dream life was going to be about being a professor, writing and teaching. Just I looked up to one of my professors. And at the middle of grad school, I just sort of hit a brick wall. I just was not just tired and burnt out, but I also saw that there was the trust of the academia. You see how faculty live, and it's hard. There's no glamour involved. People who graduated with their PhDs, the job market is brutal. And I realized, oh my goodness, I'm already in my, for example, third year. It's such a challenge. Just to keep up, I felt so overwhelmed. I'm also the child immigrants who've never been to the first PhD program. I'm just complete fish out of water. And I really didn't have a lot of support in my department. And I was also embarrassed too because, I was probably, maybe not really, but I was a disabled student. I felt I just had to prove myself. I just, take it all on. I just be as good as everyone else. And I think that also, contributed to my burnout. So the failure was, I didn't go forward with my program. I decided, what, I'm just, it's not sustainable. I'm really loving the Bay Area. I love being an activist, being involved in different communities. I still love research. And then one day, one of my friends in grad school mentioned, you just don't do research. You should do it as a staff person. So you should be what they call a staff research associate. You don't have to do a PhD. You just won't be the, lead author or just, you won't get the kudos. And I realized, oh my gosh, there are other ways, right? So it was a real bit of my ego, which this is failure, realistic, but also dealing with your own ego. I quit my PhD program. This is a very anti-battle minority. And, I got it with a terminal master's degree. So it's they didn't really have a master's program, but I did enough to get a master's. So, I have a master's, and sometimes it makes me a little embarrassed, but then sometimes I try to remind myself I did earn it. I did the work. I didn't do all of the work. But you know what? I think I wouldn't be here today if that didn't happen to me, because I ended up working at UCSF, the university. I went to grad school. I worked there for 2+ years as a researcher. That actually led me to my pathway as a consultant because I started doing kind of other work on the side as my side hustle. And then I eventually became an independent consultant. And all of these things, lead up to one another. So failures are actually probably essential, right? To be a boss and to really figuring out, what is sustainable and what is what you want out of life. I think that's no matter how stuck we get, I think sometimes we need to realize like we can always find new ways or just we can modify what we're doing. Or there's always space to do that.
You, Alice, for your vulnerability and sharing that story with us. I think it's an important reminder that, to your point, that if because maybe plans have shifted, or some may say like a door closes, that doesn't necessarily that actually could mean that it's creating space for multiple other doors to open, so you can walk through a different or an other door. And so I hope that people take some inspiration or in some understanding that even if something didn't happen the way we necessarily planned it, doesn't necessarily mean that it was not the right path or the right way. And so I appreciate you kind of lifting that up.
I'm curious about from boss to boss. I have a really interesting relationship between the idea about plants. Because sometimes I think plants are in many ways traps. I used to have goals, but I feel like sometimes that's what happened to me, where I was so invested in this particular goal that I sort of didn't even, consider something else. And I feel like, now that I have my own company, like, I'll afford to avoid a plant. And, do I have to stick with a plant? But that's, to me, I still have the freedom because I'm a one-person operation. But, you clearly are working with colleagues, your staff. Like, it's harder as a, mid-size or smaller company because, you do have to have plants. But I wonder sometimes if plants can be that double-edged sword. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I appreciate this question. I actually go back and forth around the importance. I feel like it's important to have a guide, or at least a sense of what we are trying to build towards. But I also believe that, especially as you're engaging other and different people, that even people's understanding or ways to get there could and are different. And in many ways, that's actually part of the beauty of, engaging with diverse and different types of people, is because they may inspire or provide an option or a pathway that you maybe didn't think of before. And so I've been growing, and that's something that I've been trying to build within myself, is a grace and a patience and an openness to be able to say, even though I may have an idea or thought, or thought that this was a way that we should do it, doesn't necessarily mean that has to be the only or the absolute way to do it. And so, to your point, there's a level of being nimble and being able to be fluid in processes and in ways we achieve things. And sometimes even what we're looking to achieve changes, right? So not only the plan itself, but like the outcomes or the ways in which we're measuring it shift. So I appreciate you bringing that nuance in there as part of this conversation.
As long as you didn't mind me ask you that, because I think that's something that I just wrestle with as myself. Just, I think of other bosses or people who are in leadership positions, I think about it as leadership as like responsibilities, right? It's not about just this, figurehead position, but it's about being responsible, and it's a big thing that weighs on me, I think a lot. I think I care a lot. And I think this is something that is important whenever we do make decisions, that we really put some thoughts, time, even though I think there's so many external pressures, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be, either really fast or just like, we have to do this, and that. And I think there's that tension again about being intentional and maybe sometimes being okay to say, like, let's take a pause, even though it might not be good for the company, it might not, be good financially, but maybe this is good for our people, for our staff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how do we be humane and very deliberate. I think that's to be what being a boss is too, be deliberate. But I'm very selective, I'm very careful.
Mm-hmm.
Who I want to work with and the projects I want to do, because I have a limited time. I'm a one person operation and I don't want to, there's only so many things I want to do or can't do. So I'm going to be things that get me joined. And I think that helps guide my decision making.
Mm. I appreciate you lifting that up. You kind of are leading me to the next question I wanted to ask you, Alice, around, can you share a time when you felt burdened having to explain yourself, and how have you navigated care and boundaries as a disabled activist?
Yeah, this is really funny because during the pandemic, and especially these last few months, I feel like personally, my own sleep schedule has been really kind of wonky. So, it's atypical for sure. And we were speaking about capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way labor is organized, right? That's, the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday idea. And even though that's really not the case anymore for most people, right? We have all kinds of economies now. We have remote working, we have the gig economy, we have all sorts of things that are very exploitative, right? But also things that are more flexible. So, personally, I've been, just a stranger window of availability. So, one thing that's been more hard for sometimes is when I'm trying to schedule a meeting with somebody. And, one time is different there, but that's actually when I'm going to be asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like sometimes thinking, should I push myself? Is this important enough for me to, kind of, do with less sleep? Or am I going to prioritize my health and wellness? And I would say if you asked me this in my 20s and 30s, of course I would push my mind. Of course I'm like, there's an opportunity. I'm trying to like, of course I'm going to do this. And, I feel so lucky to be at this age because I'm less worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more assertive saying, these are the days and times that work for me. Will they work for you? And then we just have a negotiation of sorts. But also keep me to that. Right? Like, these are really the best times that will work for me. And if it doesn't work for you, would you try to find an alternative? Or maybe this isn't something that we should be doing because why should we waste each other's time and effort? And being able to let go, right, of certain things that I don't have to, if I miss a project or an opportunity, I think that's okay. I think, to go to the subject of your podcast, being a boss is also elevate the confidence and the belief that if you do good work and continue to do good work, these opportunities will keep coming. Just in one way or another. It doesn't have to be this, you gotta just pursue everything out of a fear of, missing out. Or, losing your account or losing, a grant or something. I think that's, to me, about that time where I'm okay at that. Getting a huge amount of money. I just want to be able to have that kind of flexibility and the freedom to really make work for me. And that's being a boss.
Yes. Yeah. Alice, you're talking about confidence, and I think we oftentimes don't see ourselves or our people represented in. You gave examples of academia. I know I've seen your work around lack of representation and not seeing ourselves in media, and maybe even nonprofits in like the advocacy world. What has helped you in your journey to believe in yourself and to build that confidence?
It's just, again, it doesn't happen overnight. And it takes a long time, and I've constantly working on this. But it's about knowing our worth and knowing about our collective wisdom. So the communities that we're part of, just all the beauty and wisdom that's there, the brilliance, that makes me feel comforted. Right, that we're, I'm on the right track. There are people out there that care. That if my work resonates with people, there's this whole universe. I'm just one part of it. Not me. I don't need to be the center. I don't need to take over. That's a colonizer, but I am part of this larger universe. That gives me solace. Like that's such, I could keep going. But if I miss something, if I pass something up, it's just doing somebody else. And somebody, like I put something out there, it might reach somebody years later. And that feels good, right? So you just have to have faith that what you're doing is worth doing. I think that's tough, right? That is tough because, we always have a lot of self-doubt and just all the insecurities. But I do feel like, at least for me, there's such a need, there's such a void that I know what I'm doing is needed. And that makes me feel good. Like that I know I have something to contribute. So I have to have faith that whether people recognize it or not, whether people praise it or not, whether there's all those bells and whistles, it's not about that. Right? It's about leaving something behind. That to me is what it's all about. It's just leaving things behind to make the world a little bit brighter and a little bit sassier and colorful. A little more fun. And you love to do it. So that's, that's your thing, right?
Yeah.
You're very good at twirling, I have to say. So you're good at twirl the world, just make the world twirl around us.
Twirling, yes. I love a good twirl, Alice. And I appreciate the frame that you are offering around collective brilliance. I also like talking about interdependence and how, there's none of us do this on our own. There are many a people and many a person, even if they're not visible or we see them, are playing such important and critical roles in making sure that we can connect and be in community to get the things that we need. And so I'm holding that very close too, around making sure that we don't become so individualized that we erase all of the people that it takes to kind of to live and to be able to be and our reliance on each other, right? We appreciate you tuning in to the Be the Boss Now podcast, and we'll be back after this short break. If you find the conversations with these entrepreneurs inspiring and want to buy a book that offers a more practical framework for realizing your business potential, I invite you to visit BeTheBossNow.com to purchase your copy of the Be the Boss Now book. Honestly, as I shared with my therapist in a conversation that inspired me to write my first book, this was the guide I wish I had when I first started my company, especially as someone with no inheritance or previous business experience. The book became a #1 bestseller on Amazon in the 1-hour business and money short reads and corporate finance categories, and has been featured in classrooms, nonprofits, government agencies, and corporate offices. Furthermore, if you know someone who could benefit from a structured program, support, and being in community of entrepreneurs, please nominate them or consider applying. We've been hosting virtual sessions and are exploring the idea of in-person cohorts by geography in the future. So you don't want to miss out. Please visit BeTheBossNow.com to buy the book, nominate a boss, sign up for the newsletter, or take the leap for yourself today. And speaking of collective brilliance, I know that you are a co-partner on a variety of projects, including disabledwriters.com, #Criplet, #CripTheVote. Could you share with us the story around how you came up with those titles and the particular word choice and how that continues, that work it continues to evolve? And would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the 3 things you mentioned are, primarily collaborations with people. And these are all kind of outside of my kind of media work and my consulting work. These are kind of, what we should think of as labors of love and activism and just all around kind of cultural work. So, Criplet and CripTheVote are just 2 kind of online communities. We just use the hashtag. And Criplet was created actually by my co-partner, Gregory Griffith, who is a disabled novelist, and she's the first one to come up with that hashtag. So that was her credit. And for that, and CripTheVote, which is something I created with my friends Andrew and Craig. This was a way for us to talk about voting and politics because, firstly, the mainstream media, when we started in 2016 during the presidential election, there was very little discussion about disability issues towards disabled voters. And, the 3 of us were very engaged with current events and politics. So we thought, okay, well, let's just, give it a try and just use that hashtag and say, like, what do you care about? And just find a way to create community that's already there, but there's a way for us to just centralize, get mobilized that way. And that's been very exciting to see because, hashtag activism is a real thing. As we see with Black Lives Matter. But in terms of the word crip, I think, not all of the disabled people use it, but for me, it's one of my politicized identity. It's a way to talk about being disabled within a very political context. Right, that there is systemic inequality, there's ableism that's embedded into every institution, and that could be something for me, these immunity for the disabled culture, disabled wisdom, disabled people. And I think there's been so many forces that they just feel like we're alone, that they just feel like, well, it's also we've been segregated and institutionalized for centuries, if not millennia. So I think a lot of people use the word crip. It's for a kinship. It's the idea that, you and I, we may have different disabilities, but we have some sort of disability about our relationship with the state and about our experiences of marginalization. So that to me is how I understand the word crip in my own sort of identification as one. I hope that answered your question.
No, it absolutely does. It also makes me reflect on, my own experience as a gay and queer person, where I know queer is a word that many folks are reclaiming, or, there was a time where it was meant to otherize or demean or diminish folks. And now I see it as in a similar way, like as a political identity, as a reclaiming what is ours and redefining what may have others may have used it as to describe me and my people. This is actually about a collective in unity and about power in who we are and who our people are. And so I guess I'm drawing parallels to ways in which communities have reclaimed, reframed, and are redefining in many ways what some of these words could and should mean for ourselves and for our communities.
Yeah, there's sort of words that can only be used by us, right? To the queer community, there's sort of words like, I'm never going to say it. Try and, about and black communities, there's no way I'm going to say certain words because it's not what to use. And I think that's, point of respect, but also understanding that there are within community norms and sensibilities. Then also clearly there's not everybody within our community feels comfortable with that, right? There's probably the people who are politicized is queer communities and disabled communities, and there's both, but there's people there are free disabled people too. That I would generally say that, politicized folks are still the majority, right? Like most people just want to, live their lives, not think about all of the things, but I think that's okay too, right? Nobody should feel obligated just because you're a marginalized person to be an activist or to feel politicized. People should just live. We just want to live.
I agree with that and feel that is also part of, in many ways, part of how to be a boss or how to be an activist is creating more space and more ways for people to live in the ways that they want to live. And, the next question I want to ask you is around just how do we build a world that is not catered to ableist systems? I would love to hear more about your own journey and how that informs how you champion disability culture and history.
Yeah, I think this is a tough question because, it's a collective effort that must center on the most marginalized. So I think that's one way. For example, with this pandemic, it is very disheartening to see not just the states, but just all these decision makers, anti-mask mandates, this push to return to normal, when they're not listening to immunocompromised people, to disabled people, to chronically ill people who say, like, hold up, like, do you know, like, what the consequences are? I think a lot of disabled folks at the beginning of the pandemic, were saying, like, things are going to be messed up because you're not listening to us, you're not prioritizing us. And here we are now with so many variants. We really were in a society that was interdependent, that cared about everyone. We wouldn't be where we are today, but people are considered disposable. So many, we're almost reaching the 1 billion mark of deaths. I was this okay. That it's okay that you see this constantly in newspapers. Oh, this person had underlying conditions. Oh, this person has a pre-existing condition. As if, it's okay, it's those people who are going to bear the brunt. That to me is impulsive, right? That this is just, it's otherizing. While forgetting that, that's your grandpa, that's, so many people that are around you that you don't realize, I think that's what's really sad when you see employers push their workers to be unmasked or, there's no vaccination mandates because their employers, their employees will have family members that are high risk. And you're forcing those employees to make horrible decisions out of that they don't want to make. So to me, it's really sad that we are still steeped in this world where disabled people are not considered, rarely considered. They're barely given the power. They're barely centered. So I think we should just start doing that because once you're centered, multiply marginalized people and let them lead, I think our world should be in a much better place. It's so easier to do, but easier to say than to do. But I think that's sort of the broader answer to the question. But yeah, it just it's tough. It's really still sometimes I feel like what's the point sometimes? Because it feels like it's still overwhelming. The structures, the odds, I guess people are just trying to live and you just try to keep chipping away at it. You don't think that you're not alone. And in many ways, that's why I write what I write, I create my work, my podcast, other things, because I want people to see themselves. And to know that they're not alone.
Mm. I appreciate you lifting that up, Alice. Like one thing that I've been reflecting on is, the pandemic, I think, has made more visible and made more clear how the systems are not only broken, but were designed to work against marginalized people. And so I think people are being awoken or awakened to this concept of like, oh, well, maybe things weren't actually that great before the pandemic, but now that there's this pandemic, it shows these cracks in the system that are like leaving multiple communities and different people behind. And I know that even for me, I learned so much, and I've been being pushed so much around access. And I know that for many folks, Zoom and video conferencing was a new thing over the last couple of years, but it was disabled activists and organizers who are like, we've been telling you all that this is actually one way to increase access for events and meetings. And I really hold that. And even as part of this podcast, I was like, well, in order for us to have a podcast, which is mostly audio, we also need to have ASL interpreters. I want to do a video, captions, transcript, because we need to be able to create more access for folks. And that is one thing that I know that I've really taken and appreciate from folks, especially disabled activists like yourself, who remind me and push me to say, how are we increasing access as much as possible, and how we are also centering those most marginalized. And so,
and what you're doing in terms of doing all these things and learning and growing is really important, because then in the future, when you have future guests, and they won't have to ask, oh, will there be a transcript? This would just be the standard. And hopefully other podcasters and other people that you encounter will take note of the way you're doing things, and that would be a ripple effect. I think that's the hope, right? That's, as we each keep doing what we can, try to expand and to learn and to create more access, that other people will see it and it becomes normalized. And I think that's the future, right? That's the normal that we should aim for. That's what we've done in the past. We just can't go back. And I feel like there's so many things that's in the economy and in our government that just willfully wants to almost forget and just return as if we're not traumatized globally. And in fact, also, just don't mean to go on about this with the pandemic, but we're going to have hundreds of thousands and millions of people living with long COVID. Their lives are never going to be the same. And we really will have to fundamentally change everything about our society. This is, a mass event that's, we may not realize it now, but we're going to really feel it later on. Especially, I think a lot about kids and the world they're growing up in. Like, they won't know life before pandemic. Like, what does that mean for them? So, I think a lot about that. I think that we have to move forward. We can't move backwards.
I wanted to ask you, Alice, if you could share more about the concept and the framework of disability justice. I know that you, you were one person for me that really helped me understand more about it, helped me make sure I knew some of the folks that were critical into coming up with the framework. And so can you share briefly with folks, who are those people that you think who are the people that help create that disability justice framework, and anything you want others to know about them?
Yeah, I think a lot of people hear that term and they think of maybe this is a new way of talking about disability rights. And it's not. They're kind of different. Rights are very much within this legalistic framework that you are given rights. Right, that there's a law, that there's things that the state does that renders you a person with, protections. Disability justice was created primarily by disabled women of color, trans disabled people, and mostly queer disabled people of color in the San Francisco Bay Area about maybe 10, 15 years ago. And the best source of to understand that is a group called Sins Invalid, SINSINVALID. If you do a Google search and go to their websites, they actually have a disability justice primer that really goes into the principles. And some of the principles are what we talked about today. Interdependence, leadership of the most impacted, that nobody's disposable. Yeah, this was a response by marginalized disabled people within this broader white-centric disability rights community. So they didn't feel like those issues really address their lived experience. So disability justice is much more, I think, broader, nuanced, and much more collectivist and anti-capitalist politic. So I think those are the main kind of hallmarks of disability justice. And for anybody listening, just a simple reminder is not a synonym for disability rights. So just be careful to when you use the term. We need rights. We do need rights, but we also need justice.
Right. We need rights. We need justice. They're not. We can't equate them. And I understand justice to be broader and more encompassing than rights. I would love to talk a little bit about your books. I know you edited one book called Disability Visibility, and you have a memoir coming out called Year of the Tiger. In this Year of the Tiger, can you tell us more about what led you to name the books you did and what you learned during the processes of writing those books?
The first book was an anthology, and the term disability visibility is from the project that I started about in 2014. So that was something that I kind of initiated, that started really as an oral history campaign, and it just snowballed. It became my life's work. I basically, getting back to being a boss, it's sort of funny. I did it as a side thing for a while, and then it quickly, it came to a moment where, like, well, should I do this full time? Should I quit my job? Like, it seems like the way of going. And there was another scary moment, right? Like, this is like, do I, go full all in? And I did. And, within a few years, I realized, okay, it's time to form an LLC. Because I need a, business entity. So those are all different ways of just the evolution of what started really as creating culture, doing our stories. It has become this publishing / media / consulting company, which is, pretty wild to think about. And I couldn't be more excited and happy with the way things have turned out. And I think that's been also interesting too, that if you keep doing the work, people will notice. And that's how I got a book deal. So that's, I did. I used the first opportunity for a book deal to do anthology to really showcase the brilliance of our community. I didn't want it to be about me. It was a joy to edit the anthology. So, that anthology came out in 2020. Then I thought, okay, what should be my follow-up? Then I thought, okay, it could be my time. Maybe I deserve. And I also do this as talked about my age. I'm 48. Just really proud of it too, to be this age. And just looking back, I was like, whoa, like there's a huge array of things I've created, and real array of writing. So that this to be really something nice to put together as a memoir. So that's the purpose of You're the Tiger. It's kind of a memoir, but also collective works. So sort of like essays, different articles, blog posts, conversations with people. So those are it's a bit of a mishmash. It is really, really fun. I just really was determined last year to make it as fun as possible. And you'll have to find out and see if you like it. September 6th.
Well, I definitely pre-ordered my copy. I am looking forward to reading your memoir. I personally was also born in the year of the tiger, and so I feel like
I love it. Little tigers.
So here's to some roaring success for your book and continued like prosperity and love and community, especially
Treasure power, Greg. Your tiger power.
tiger
I
power.
love it. I love the winter we are. This is the winter. This is place I want.
Yeah,
Little tigers.
fellow tigers, and I love that we are lifting that up, especially as folks have been celebrating Lunar New Year. The next question I want to ask you, Alice, and even this is maybe kind of connecting back to one of the initial stories you told us, from your younger self, but maybe thinking back to that younger Alice, and now that you are at this this age of 48. Is there anything that you would tell that younger Alice then that now?
I would just say that you belong to the future. I did not think I was going to belong to the future. I didn't see a future, to be really honest. And I read about this in the book, but I'll just tell you as well. When I was, a child diagnosed with my disability, the doctors told my parents that I would have lived past 18. So I grew up not knowing how to see myself, right? So I basically had to write myself in. There's that famous quote by a writer, but you have to write yourself up. I did a table, I think, media blog, but you have to force yourself to really imagine yourself in the future. So I think that to me is the most important thing. So, the little Alice, well, I didn't see her. I remember this. I didn't even think about what I would look like she was a 30-year-old. I just didn't even think about it. But I told little Alice that she belongs to the future, and that the future is hers.
You had a different plan than what that doctor said. And I personally could just want to offer that I am so grateful to know you, Alice, so grateful to experience your brilliance and your wisdom and to be in community with you. And I'm so inspired by how you, as you've redefined that plan, as you become a boss in your own right, that you have lifted up others, you have shared the stories of others and created space for so many folks to feel seen and part of something bigger than themselves. And so thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This is really delightful. And I think conversations are where so many things begin, like dreams, activism, all types of things. So, I always love being in conversation with people. And it's been a delight. So thank you for having me on.
It was an absolute honor and pleasure. And I'm excited about folks being able to learn more about you and being able to read your memoir in this year of the tiger. Thanks again, Alice. Thank you for checking out the Be the Boss Now podcast with your host, Gregory Allen Datu Sandana, president and co-founder of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. We believe you can and will be a stronger entrepreneur, embracing fear, honoring failure, and remaining humble enough to be teachable. Check out our book, this podcast, and other resources available for those of you current or aspiring bosses at BeTheBossNow.com. Be sure to follow Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting or myself on all major social media platforms at CSWS Consulting and at Gregory Sandana at GREGORYCENDANA. More information can also be found on our website at cswsconsulting.com. The Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting team would also like to thank the following people who are critical to the production of the Be the Boss Now podcast. Vanessa Shiliwala of Thrive Spice Media, executive producer. Melissa Kelley Colibri, accessibility coordinator. Darryn, Rousseau, Hollifield, and Stephanie Chao, American Sign Language interpreters. And also all my family, friends, educators, and anyone, including the naysayers, who played a role in shaping the boss I am today. This is for you and for everyone with an idea of starting a business. Let this be a guide, light, and motivation. We all can be the boss now.